On the other side, you could have coaches that are not adapting as well. Which leads me to the conversation that I kind of want to have about Lincoln Riley and whether or not he's all right. Because I'm looking at this, and we're a long way from the Holiday Bowl. We're a long way from Miller Moss throwing for 6 TDs and looking like, oh, Lincoln Riley just picks a quarterback, and that guy is going to be a Heisman Trophy finalist. It's not out of the question, but it's really, really hard for Miller Moss at this point. Because we're talking about a Lincoln Riley USC that is 10-5 in its last 15 games. But more than that, Clay Helton went 23-9 through his first 32 games. Lincoln Riley has gone 22-10. This year, he does not have a Heisman Trophy at quarterback, we think. I think we know, but we think. Let's be kind about it. And even when he had one in Caleb Williams last year, they went 7-5. The offensive line, Josh Henson's offensive line, has not been great, even as the defense has gotten better. And what was really an inflection point and glaring to me is USC could only put up 17 points against Minnesota last week in their loss. Why is that important? Because the fewest amount of points scored by Lincoln Riley football teams have come in the 2021 season. 23 against Nebraska in a win, 16 against West Virginia in a win. That's a problem. I don't know if y'all know this, SC fans, but after scoring that low total at Oklahoma, he bolted and went to LA. Now you're getting to see what it feels like to root for a Lincoln Riley coach team that can't score. That's the one thing you've been able to depend on. Matter of fact, going into this year, one of the things I would tell folks is that Lincoln Riley's football teams put up 40 or more 50% of the time. They have struggled to do that in Big Ten play. They have struggled to win games in Big Ten play. Some of this, I think you have to attribute to time zones just because the statistics are so out of whack, man. I mean, like, Big Ten teams traveling across 2 or more time zones are 1-8. The only win is Indiana at UCLA. UCLA is not good. Indiana seems to be. But also, Indiana played a Friday game the week before they played that game to UCLA and had a little bit more time to adapt. Outside of that, if you're traveling 2 time zones, you've taken an L, which does not bode well for Ohio State, I might add, as they're going to be traveling to the West Coast to play this game on Eastern time, right? I'm curious what you think Lincoln Riley's ceiling and USC ceiling is this year, because if they lose to Penn State this year, this week, and James Franklin gets to move to, what looks like it's going to be 6-0, it's going to be difficult to defend what's going on in LA right now. We don't know how good Penn State is. As a matter of fact, we have him at number 4 because we kind of have to have him at number 4. Why do we have Penn State at 4? Because we can't put Iowa State there, because you will not suffer that. Nobody's going to let that pass. Back to you believe in brands, right? Doesn't matter that Iowa State has a really great win against a decent Big Ten opponent in Iowa. It only matters that they're Iowa State, right? Penn State benefits from Joe Paterno, benefits from being the kind of program that you could depend on to play in a meaningful bowl game at the end of the year, whether they are independent or Big Ten members. As we're talking about SC, though, we're talking about a program that has won 11 national championships and loves its Heisman winners. We're talking about a program that has some truly fair weather fans when we're talking about attending games. A lot of USC fans work in media, right? Work in film, work in entertainment. They don't really have as many fans that are regular-ass people like you or me. Or like the folks that root for Arkansas or root for Nebraska or even Tennessee for that matter, or Bama. People that have to show up to work and talk about this stuff, okay? You show up to work and you got to talk about this stuff as a USC alumnus. You're probably working in Silicon Valley. Somebody went to Stanford, right? Somebody went to Cal. They kind of sort of like college football, but only when their teams are good. I'm curious how long a leash you're going to give Lincoln Riley before you decide you got to do something if you're Jen Cohen. Like if you take a loss to Penn State and you move to 3 losses and you're looking around and you're going, are we going to get to 8 wins? You got to do some soul searching. I don't think they're going to pull a trigger on Lincoln Riley like that. I do know that he is starting to show a little bit of signs of frustration. He snapped at a reporter about a question that was supposed to be asked to to Jamil Muhammad, and I to be fair, I don't think it was a fair question to ask the head coach, but I also don't think snapping at the guy was the right thing to do. Either way, you could see that the Minnesota loss was starting to eat at them in a way that the Michigan loss quite didn't. You also add to this that the Minnesota team that beat them isn't great. They're probably as good as Michigan is, if not a little bit better, because I go back to that onside kick. Referees get it right. Minnesota gets the ball. It looks like Minnesota's going to score, because Minnesota has scored 21 consecutive points in the fourth quarter. Add to that what Lincoln Riley's USC allowed. They had a 7-point lead going into the fourth quarter against Minnesota, and they lost that game by 7. It feels a lot like the kind of losses that Oklahoma fans would rue. Up 17 against Georgia, going into halftime, you squib kick it, you give them the ball back, they go score, they win the game in double overtime. There's something about being able to finish games with Lincoln Riley football teams that we need to start investigating. We need to start taking a look at. We need to start to understand. I'm not quite sure what that thing is. I'm not even quite sure that it is as big a problem as we would make it to be. I am saying that wins and losses matter. I am saying that I did not expect USC to have 2 losses ahead of their game against Penn State. I thought that would be a matchup of 2 undefeated opponents. And then we get to find out who might be the 3rd or 4th best team in the Big Ten, as we are still pretty much in consensus that Ohio State and Oregon are the 2 best teams in the Big Ten. And now we got to a place where Texas is the only undefeated team left in the SEC. And this felt like a really good year for USC to try to jump up and take one of these college football playoff spots, right? Because Lincoln Riley had not have a problem getting to the playoff at Oklahoma. He did go to SC because, and he said at the time, I don't have what I need at Oklahoma to win a national championship. He thought he could get that at a place that he thought he could turn into the mecca of college football in LA. Mecca and LA don't rhyme. That's one. Leading college football in LA doesn't really rhyme either. College football is mostly a southern sport. College football is played in places where we don't have NFL teams, and they got 2. Okay? Add to this the move to the Big Ten, right? Which I think is going to benefit everybody in the Big Ten from the long run, but right now feels like if you're a West Coast team, you're playing at a disadvantage. Okay? We'll see how that disadvantage may or may not show up the rest of the way. But it felt like this year was the year for teams like Penn State, teams like Tennessee, teams like USC to make the college football playoff for the first time, because we extended by 8 teams. You've literally got 3 times as many chances to get into that thing as you did before. And Penn State is holding up their end. Tennessee is holding up their end. It's SC that's not holding up theirs. I don't know if you can miss the college football playoff more than once and continue to be head coach at USC, given it's a 12-team playoff. That seems difficult. That seems hard. That seems as if they're not going to let you figure this out. Do I think that Lincoln Riley will figure this out? I do. I really do. He's a very smart man. He's a very good coach, and he is one of the best quarterback developers in history. Just check the resume. But in as far as building teams that can win national championships, he still ain't done that. And this USC team does not feel like the one that is going to win a national championship. They run the table. Let's assume this. Let's assume they run the table. Are they getting into the playoff? Maybe. I don't think it's a sure thing. And that's what I think should terrify you as a Trojan fan. You would think that a 10-win USC team gets into the playoff. Not if you got an 11-win Notre Dame, right? Which would be a win that you would have to have at the end of the season, right? Would a 10-win A&M get in over a 10-win SC? I think so. Given what we've seen from Missouri so far, given what we've seen from A&M, given what we've seen from Notre Dame. These are questions that make the sport, I think, a little bit more open to talking about. And a little bit more fun, if we're being honest about it, than it is for folks that don't watch college football as religiously as we do. The folks that don't seem to like college football's 12-team playoff are people that watch the NFL on Sundays. Not to say the college football fans don't, but you're primarily watching the NFL on Sundays. You're primarily showing, if your lead segment to your sports talk show is an NFL segment, you do not do college football. That's just not what it is. Because the NFL is always going to rate, right? It's always going to outrate college football, no matter what you're talking about. You want to talk about Dallas Cowboys? You want to talk about Ohio State? It feels like the Cowboys are going to win out. Same thing with the Steelers, so that I'm not just picking on the Cowboys. I think as we are hearing more people that seem to have an opinion that is negative about the 12-team playoff, I would ask you to ask them, who's your team? Who's your college football team? Who did you watch this week? Did you watch when Georgia played Tennessee Tech? No? Okay, then I would not like to hear your opinion. Okay? I'm going to watch Oklahoma play Maine because I'm that kind of guy, right? You're that kind of person. Did you watch Texas play UTSA? Did you watch Texas play ULM? Or are you only watching Texas play Oklahoma? Many of the people that don't like the 12-team playoff only watch 2 or 3 games a year. They can't tell you who the starting offensive line is on the team they even claim to care about. Okay? Bear that in mind as we're talking about these things that relate to Lincoln Riley, to USC, to Big Ten championships, to SEC championships, and what this weekend might wrought. Last thing I want to leave you with on this one is I hope we have more week 7s. I hope we have more games where we all know who the top 25 teams are, and we get to see these top 25 matchups play out, and we get to see whether or not Travis Hunter can lead Colorado past Kansas State and perhaps put them in a position to win the Big 12 championship. We get to see whether or not Oklahoma figures that out against Texas, or maybe Texas is not that good. And more than that, we get to get a real feeling for who the best teams in college football are, right? Like we did with Georgia, Alabama, and then Vanderbilt happened. Because that's the other thing that I'm looking at. Because I think Ohio State has Indiana later in the season. What if Indiana's good? Indiana beats Ohio State. Ohio State makes the Big Ten championship game, and they win the Big Ten championship with 1 loss to Indiana. Does Indiana get in? Be an interesting question to ask. Okay? I'm just throwing that out there. All right. That is going to do it for tonight's live episode of the #1 college football show. If you like the show, please consider subscribing to the show, and we will see y'all on the flip side tomorrow. Doses.